This is nice being here. TED Talk. A lot of people want to do TED Talks, and I finally got to do one. And most people want to do one for the same reason I do. I want to steal this headset, is what I want to do. A lot of great talks here. I did some research, and you find one about creativity. There was one about why you should stop watching pornography. And then there was one about creativity and finance and friendships and relationships. And there was one about increasing your libido. I thought, well, start watching porn again. I am here not to talk about any of those things. I'm here to talk about death. First, a story for you. A million years ago, I'm on a courtesy van going to the airport from a hotel. Two guys get on. One says to the other, hey, you hear about Bob? No, what happened? What happened? No, it's his mom. What happened to his mom? She died. Ooh, sorry, how old was she? Guy says 96. Another one says 96. That's enough. I thought, how insensitive is that? But then I thought, no, how brilliant is that? Ready to go at 96. 96-year-old people, as bad as this sounds, are supposed to die. I'll give you another story. My father, when he was in a retirement center, used to eat with a guy named Sid. And Sid used to steal ice cream, bring it up to his room, come back down to the dining room and say he didn't get an ice cream cone. So he's sitting there, and then 2 weeks later, Sid, at 98, I think he was, has a terrible stroke. Not that 98-year-olds ever have good strokes, but he had a terrible stroke. He's ready to go. His daughter is not. His daughter comes to visit him and says, Dad, we're going to get physical therapy for you. We're going to get occupational therapy. We're going to get speech therapy for you. He says, I'm done. She goes, Daddy, don't talk like that. You got a granddaughter. He goes, listen, I had a good life. I made a lot of money. I'm ready to go. And she said, what about your unborn grandchild? He said, cut her a check. I want to be in the ground Sunday. And he was. And I thought, that's the thing. She was thinking about her father. And he was thinking about Sid. And that's the point here. Sometimes we miss our parents. Sometimes we miss our children, our brothers and sisters who die. And sometimes we miss Wayne or Paul or Jack. Another story for you. I used to watch The Wonder Years. Great show back in the 70s and 80s. And I love the show because Kevin Arnold in the show, he had an older brother, Wayne. I have an older brother, Wayne. He had a father, Jack. I have a father, Jack. I didn't have a Winnie Cooper, which pretty much changes your life if you have a Winnie Cooper. Well, one of the episodes, the father takes a job out of town. And the father cannot make it back for Thanksgiving. And the family's devastated. Well, the father calls about a day or two before Thanksgiving. And he says, I'm coming home. And Kevin says to him, I thought you couldn't afford to come home. And the father says, I can't afford not to, which is not the story I want to tell you. So they go to the airport because the father says, have everybody meet me at the airport. Now, back then, you could go out literally to the terminal. You could go out to the runway, and that's what the family did. And they watched the plane land, and then when the plane lands, the mother jumps over this little fence, runs towards the plane. As the father's coming down, they hug. And just then the narrator said, in the voice of Kevin Arnold, it's the first time in my life I realized before they were mom and dad, they were Jack and Norma. And I thought, that's the key. So here we go. That's Jack and Florence, right there, my mother and father, when they first got married. They were Jack and Florence long before they were mom and dad. In fact, my father there, I'll show you. This is what he looked like when he lost his hair and he had new hair. Right? But back then, that was the guy who went to World War II. And I showed him a picture similar to that one. He said, can you imagine? That's who they went, that's who they sent to win the war. And that's how they all felt. And they won anyway. So what do we want from death? Do we want death, these people that we love? Is the point to show them our grief, or is the point to show them Jack and Florence? And there's a difference. In the movie Avalon, at the end, the guy is suffering from dementia. He's suffering from Alzheimer's, just like my father. And his grandson comes to visit him, and he says to the grandson in a moment of lucidity, he said, I went to the place I used to live, and it didn't exist. And then I went to the shop that I owned. It didn't exist. And then I went to the nightclub I owned for 2 years, and thankfully it was there. And then the grandfather said to the grandson, it's a good thing the nightclub was there. Otherwise, I would have thought I never existed. I never mattered. When you transmit, I think, when you transmit someone's relationship to you, your love for someone, when they die, you have two choices. You give them your grief, or you give them the story. And I think the story of their lives is really the point here. How do we transmit these people's lives? Now, I wrote a book about my father, and as you can see, I got to shut up. It's called, I really can't say this, but it's called Jack Shit. And when you want to write a book, always keep in mind, try to call it something that nobody can actually pronounce in mixed company. Will really help you out. So it's called that, and it talks about the last 20 years of his life, which is my greatest memory of him. 20 years, and he lives 96, from 76 to 96. Those are the years I remember. And what I remember is the day he died, the 2 days before he died, I'm trying to figure out, how do I capture my father, irrespective of my own grief about my father? And he's lying in the hospital bed. This is 2 days before he dies. And he's aspirating. He's got, I don't know, he can't breathe, he can't swallow, COPD. But he tells me he wants water. And I said, I can't get you water, Dad, because you'll drown. Not that he understands what I'm saying. And I can't not get him water because he's going to starve to death. And finally I said, Dad, I'll tell you what, I'll get the nurse. Maybe she can bring you water. He goes, she's not going to do anything. She's a Republican. He went out on a joke. I thought, how wonderful is that? How do I transmit that to people who don't know my father? That's my father, not my grief that I'm losing my dad. We all lose dads. We all lose moms. We all lose brothers and sisters. That's the way it goes. The day he died, the actual day he died, he was lying there and he's reaching out, which I guess is pretty normal for people. They reach out, grabbing for something. And he says, look at that baby. I go, what? There's no baby, Dad. He goes, no, there's a baby. I go, there's no baby. He goes, look at the baby. There's no baby. And I realize the TV's off. He's looking into the screen, and he sees a reflection of himself in the screen. And he sees his stomach. He thinks it's a pregnant woman. He thinks that pregnant woman is giving birth. He thinks that baby is going to be him. I thought, wow, that's what we try to do. We try to translate, communicate those human beings. And how we get through death, how we get through others' death, is we remember that it's an honor for us to be there to watch them die. It's like the best and worst place for you to be, is to be with somebody when they die. This is him pointing to a large bagel. First, the subtitle of the book is Voluptuous Bagels and Other Concerns of Jack Friedman. He said, you can't eat those bagels because they're too big. They're too voluptuous. But he ate them anyway. But he should tell everybody, you can't eat them because they're too voluptuous. This is him when he finally took off his toupee. He's talking to it. He's letting it know its life is over. You're done, he says. Nobody wants you. Right? 96-year-old men die, as I said. 96-year-old people who die, you kind of understand it. It's okay. Right? My rabbi once said, if you could live forever on the provision that nobody would come after you, would you take the deal? And I thought to myself, well, I know some people who take the deal. But his point was cycle of life, right? That makes sense. Grief is not grief and death is not death, right? As I said, now that's my son. He's 24. He died at 24. Drug overdose. When 24-year-olds die, it's not when 96-year-olds die. It's not when dogs die. It's not when 50-year-old wives or husbands die. That's a special kind of grief, right? How do you capture a 24-year-old in a rocky relationship? When he died, the rabbi gave a sermon. It was a terrible sermon. Why was it so bad? It wasn't his fault. My son couldn't fill the 24 years. You know how pathetic it is when you say to somebody, I'm not laughing, when you say to somebody, he loved animals? That's what you got? That's his life? He loved animals? He was good to people? The memory has to be in the experience. The memory has to be in their life, irrespective of you. They touched a lot of people, not just you. And I think the key is when we transmit this, if it's important to you, to transmit, and I think it is, right? We love people. We want others to get an impression of them. We want others to see and feel what we do. And that's the three of us, my daughter, my son. And the funny thing about my daughter is when I wrote the book about her brother, her mother, their mother, my first wife, wouldn't read it. And she wouldn't read it, I heard, because I had stolen the narrative. The book about my son, in a book called 4 Days and a Year Later, was my story, my narrative of the 4 days after Paul died and a year later. And I thought everybody has a narrative. Since mine was published, it's mine. I guess the glib answer is, well, write your own damn book. But in this case, that's how I chronicled the life. And it was about the missed opportunities. It was about the moments we actually got right. That's him at 3 years old when things were much better. And that's him as a baby. And that's one of the things you think about when somebody dies, is who is this person? Who are these people? Where did the son go? Where did the father go? A couple of other stories for you before I go. My rabbi used to say, I'm quoting him a lot. I guess he made a bigger impression on me than I thought. He used to say that the best reason to be a good person in life is so others don't have to lie about you when you're dead. And then at Paul's service, at his benediction, excuse me, he said, it's very difficult for people who don't have a problem getting through life to understand those who do. I thought that's where the sympathy comes in. That's where the empathy, that's where the humility comes in, when you say, I cannot do this alone. I have to try to capture that person's life, not just my struggle with it. And I thought, that is the key. Who are these people that we are missing? Who are these people who are not here anymore? And what do we want others to get from them? What I want to tell you is, when you are in the middle of a relationship with someone who dies, remember that the point of it is you are the narrator of their life. Right? You are the person who feels the grief. You're trying to express this grief to others. But you are something of an unreliable narrator. Right? It all comes through you. It may be objective, the stories you're telling, but the subjectivity is you're picking out what matters and what doesn't. If you want to figure out the best way to get through death, and who doesn't, other people's death, people you love, whatever, the best way to get through death, best way to get death right, is to get life right. Their life through you. You cannot figure it out. You cannot figure it out the last 25 minutes when you're standing over their hospital bed. When they talk about life being a journey, expression that I hate, that's what they're talking about. How you capture those moments. So when people die, when they're supposed to, when 96-year-old men die, or 24-year-old sons die, you will know how to get it right. And that's the honor. And that's how you get beyond death, is you just realize you have to get beyond life, and then you get beyond death. Thank you very much.